Now, new warnings over cybersecurity and the growing cyber war between the U.S. and China. U.S. officials charging members of a shadowy unit in the Chinese military, accusing its agents of stealing trade secrets from American companies. Pierre Thomas is back with the dramatic details.
The FBI claims the scale of China's theft of U.S. company research, design, and marketing strategy had reached a point where something had to be done.
The amount of theft that's going on is simply staggering.
So for the first time ever, Justice Department prosecutors charged the Chinese military with hacking into U.S. companies, stealing extraordinary amounts of trade secrets, of state-sponsored economic espionage, costing American jobs.
It's going to make a big difference in the competitive landscape. American companies won't exist anymore in some fields.
Richard Bakelet was part of the security firm Mandiant that helped uncover the alleged Chinese hacking.
Last year alone, 3,000 U.S. companies received notification that they had had a significant breach. Most of those could be attributed to the Chinese.
So in other words, we spend billions and billions of dollars developing products to sell, and then they take those secrets and therefore they don't have to spend the money?
That's exactly right. We're at a really vulnerable point here.
Case in point. 5 Chinese military officials, allegedly part of a specialized Army unit known as 61398, were charged this week with targeting U.S. companies. The Chinese government called the charges bogus, fabricated.
Do you have the goods?
We would prove beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury of 12 who would agree unanimously that this conduct was done by these 5 guys.
It's a delicate line for the U.S. after Edward Snowden revealed the U.S. engaged in its own spying against our own allies.
Some critics of what the U.S. government did on Monday in charging these military officials would say, look at what the NSA is doing. We're spying all the time. Isn't this hypocrisy?
We are not targeting private companies in order to take their trade secrets and then pass them to American companies.
We are aware of no nation in the world that publicly states that theft of information for commercial gain is acceptable.
The stakes could not be higher, and with these charges, the U.S. entered a new frontier in the geopolitical fight with China for economic supremacy. For This Week, Pierre Thomas, ABC News, Washington.
And joining us now, former ambassador to China and GOP presidential candidate, Governor Jon Huntsman, and our ABC News contributor, Steve Ganyard, who is just back from Asia. Welcome, gentlemen. Governor Huntsman, I want to start with you. You were also the co-chair of the Commission on the Theft of American Intellectual Property. One of the things the commission found was, quote, the American response to date of hectoring governments and prosecuting individuals has been utterly inadequate to deal with the problem. So what good does this indictment do? Is the Obama administration doing enough?
Well, it's been a problem for probably 40 years, which is to say the whole length of the U.S.-China relationship formally. And it ratcheted up about, I'd say, 8 years ago with the creation of this PLA unit, 61398, and the systematic development of indigenous innovation, which is to say picking winners locally in the Chinese economy. So we have a real problem today, and we assessed theft of intellectual property as costing the United States roughly $300 billion per year. So that's all, everybody combined. I'd say China's probably 70% of that number. But what it does, Martha, it gets to the heart and soul of innovation and trade secrets and the creation of new industries in America that we do better than anybody else. And it's really hard to put a price tag on innovation in a creative environment.
Let me ask you again, are we doing enough? Will this do any good?
This is symbolic. You put 5 PLA members in a most wanted poster. We're not going to make any headway on this until such time as we really target market access in this country and to say, what is it that China wants more than anything else? They want access to our market. They want to go public on our stock exchange. They want access to our banks and our financial services. And at some point, we have to start getting serious about how we respond beyond just the symbolic measures. And while this will ratchet up the level of discussion, I don't think it's going to do much to really stop the activity that's going on.
Steve, you heard in Pierre's piece, and you know this well, Edward Snowden revealed that the U.S., of course, was spying on China and cyber spying. So what's the difference between what the U.S. is doing and what China's doing.
Right. So what the administration tried to do this week is make a moral and legal distinction between what we do in terms of spying for national security and what the Chinese do, which is spy for national security and for profit. So there's a big difference here between stealing intellectual property and protecting your country. But we're about the only country in the world that feels that way. You saw Secretary Gates this week confirm the open secret that the French government has been stealing directly from U.S. industry for decades. So this is really a view that's held only by the U.S., but as the governor said, it costs us hundreds of thousands of jobs per year.
How do the Chinese retaliate, or will they retaliate? And when do we call this an act of war?
Well, the laws of physics apply in the U.S.-China relationship. For every action, there is a reaction. And I fully expect that there will be a reaction by the Chinese to what we have done. It probably will cost us a whole lot more than it's costing them, is what is sad about this whole thing, the symbolic gesture. We need to be very fastidious in differentiating espionage, country-to-country espionage and spying from the theft of intellectual property rights in innovation. We don't do a very good job in differentiating those two, but we've got to keep them in different silos. We take the espionage part and put it over here and say, we'll figure out the red lines between our countries, and if you cross them, you have a certain penalty to pay. But in the meantime, let's work on this serious economic issue, which is theft of intellectual property rights, and begin to determine the price that people will pay.
The government can really only do so much to protect private industry. So we get cyber mercenaries, Steve. What happens now for these companies to actually try to protect themselves?
That's right. There are real limits to what the U.S. government can do. Some of this responsibility needs to go back on U.S. private industry. They've parked the Ferrari in a bad neighborhood overnight and left the keys in the car, and they're shocked to find the Ferrari is gone in the morning. So the real fight here is between private industry, those who would steal, whether it's transnational groups, whether it's countries that would steal from them. But there's no Marine Corps in cyberspace. And so there's going to have to be a deliberate effort, and whatever you want to call it, active defense, do you want to call it hacking back? I think we're only about to hit the cusp of where private companies are going to have to hack back.